They don't see your kindness as strength. They see it as an opportunity. You hold the door open, and they walk through it like they own the building. You stay late to help, and they forget your name when credit is handed out. You forgive, and they take that forgiveness as permission to repeat the offense. The world doesn't always reward the good, not because goodness is weak, but because it's rare, and what is rare is often misunderstood. You are never naive, you are hopeful. You believed that being good would lead to good things, and in many ways it still can, but not before you learn this. Goodness without wisdom is an open gate in a world full of takers, and until you understand the weight of that truth, they will keep using you. The currency of kindness is often undervalued. They say kindness is a virtue, and it is. But what they don't say, what no one warns you about, is how often that virtue is mistaken for vulnerability. You give your time, your energy, your trust, freely, not because you expect applause, but because it's who you are. You offer help before it's asked for. You listen when no one else will. You remember the small things about people, the things they thought no one noticed. And in a perfect world, that would be enough to earn you respect. In a perfect world, kindness would be recognized as a kind of strength, a quiet, dignified force that holds the fabric of humanity together. But this world isn't perfect, and in this world, kindness is often treated like a discount item taken quickly, paid for with nothing. What they fail to see is that your kindness costs you something. It's not just a smile, it's not just patience. It's the way you carry someone else's weight even while your own shoulders ache. It's how you give from an emotional well that's not infinite, even though you pretend it is. But to the wrong people, to the users, the self-serving, the emotionally bankrupt, your kindness is not seen as noble. It's seen as available, and what is always available becomes, in their eyes, disposable. They take your help without hesitation. They lean on your support without appreciation. They expect your forgiveness, as if it's a service you owe them. And here's the quiet tragedy. Good people rarely broadcast their pain. When they're hurt, they keep going. When they're disappointed, they smile anyway. That resilience, that strength in silence, it becomes invisible to the very ones who should see it. Because kindness doesn't demand attention, it rarely gets any. And in that absence of recognition, good people become invisible not because they are weak, but because they are consistent. So what happens next? The world begins to assume. It assumes your kindness means you have nothing better to do. It assumes your patience means you have no boundaries. And worst of all, it assumes you'll always be there. But kindness is not endless. Even the softest hearts can close. Even the gentlest spirits have limits. The mistake is thinking they don't. You see, the currency of kindness is not measured in moments, it's measured in sacrifice. And when it's undervalued, when it's taken without thought, the cost shows up somewhere else. In burnout, in emotional fatigue, in the quiet sadness of being overlooked. But here's what must be remembered: just because they didn't see your worth doesn't mean it wasn't there. Just because they mistook your giving for weakness doesn't mean you were wrong to give. It means they weren't worthy of receiving it. Let them go. Let them learn not from your anger, but from your absence. Because sometimes the greatest act of kindness is choosing not to be used again. Silence is misread as weakness. You stayed quiet not because you had nothing to say, but because you were measuring the weight of your words. You walked away from conflict not because you were afraid to fight, but because you knew the cost of battles that lead nowhere. You forgave without shouting, endured without complaining, and gave space when others would have demanded attention. And yet, your silence was mistaken. They saw your calm as cowardice. They mistook your patience for passivity, and in their rush to define you, they got it all wrong. They never saw what it took to hold back words that could have cut like knives. They didn't hear the war inside your chest as you swallowed your pride for the sake of peace. They never noticed the restraint it takes to smile when every fiber in you wants to scream. But make no mistake, silence is not surrender. It is discipline, and not everyone is capable of it. Loud voices often mask empty hearts, but those who carry silence like a shield, they're not empty. They're overflowing with strength, with clarity, with a kind of inner power that doesn't need to shout to be real. You see, you kept your dignity when others lost theirs. You allowed disrespect to echo unanswered, thinking that maturity would speak louder than confrontation. But what they saw was something else. They thought you're soft. They thought you won't fight back. They mistook your depth for emptiness, and when people don't understand your silence, they invent meaning for it, a meaning that suits their comfort, not your truth. But here's what they missed. Every quiet person has a breaking point. Every patient soul has a line that cannot be crossed twice. And when that line is crossed, the silence doesn't erupt into noise, it turns into distance. A kind of cold, calculated absence that says more than words ever could. It's not revenge, it's revelation, a realization that being quiet didn't make you weak. It made you dangerous in a way they never prepared for. Because when good people finally go quiet, not out of peace, but out of clarity, it's the final sound before they leave forever. Let them misread you, let them call your silence a flaw. One day they'll remember the version of you that stayed, that endured, that kept giving chances without making a scene. And in that memory, they'll realize too late what it meant to be in the presence of someone whose silence wasn't a void, but a gift, a space they could have filled with gratitude, if only they had the wisdom to recognize it. But now it's gone, because you finally understood that silence is not just a form of strength, it is sometimes the final answer. The mirror principle, you reflect what they lack, you didn't change them, you revealed them. That's what good people do without even trying. You become a mirror. Your compassion shows how cold they've grown. Your loyalty exposes how easily they betray. Your honesty uncovers their manipulation, and your emotional depth brings their emptiness to the surface. And that reflection, they can't stand it, not because of what you did, but because of what they see when they're around you, a contrast too sharp to ignore. You see, people don't always react to you. They react to what you make them feel about themselves. And when you're grounded in truth, when you're calm in chaos, when you carry a quiet kind of goodness that can't be faked, it stings those who are built on facades. You don't even need to call them out. Your presence does that for you. They look at you and see every piece of themselves they tried to bury, and instead of rising to meet your level, they try to dim your light. That's why some people are cruel to those who were kindest to them, because your light made them uncomfortable. Your consistency showed how unstable they were. Your ability to love without games exposed their addiction to control. They didn't want to be better, they just wanted you to stop reminding them they weren't. And so they did what the insecure always do. They twisted your goodness into guilt, your care into weakness, your patience into naivety, not because it was true, but because that was easier than facing their own reflection. The truth is, you were never the problem. You were the challenge, the test, the standard, and rather than rise, they chose to run, or worse. They chose to tear you down so they wouldn't have to look up. But remember this, when someone resents you for what you never did wrong, it says nothing about your character and everything about their discomfort. Some people want a mirror that flatters, not one that tells the truth. And when they find themselves reflected in your integrity, your strength, your emotional depth, they panic. Not everyone can handle what you quietly reveal. So what do? You stop apologizing for who you are. You stop shrinking just to make them feel taller. You don't dim your light, you let it burn, even if it blinds the ones who only knew how to live in shadows. And you remember, being a mirror is not a curse. It's a gift, because one day they'll look back, and when they finally develop the courage to face themselves, they'll realize you weren't the one who made them feel small, you were the one who made them realize they had more growing to do. Givers don't always guard their borders. The heart that gives without measure rarely builds a fence. You didn't count the hours, didn't track the favors, didn't keep a ledger of how many times you showed up for others. You just did. You gave freely, instinctively, quietly, not for recognition, not for return, but because something in you couldn't ignore someone in need. But in giving everything, you left nothing to protect yourself. No warning signs, no locked gates, no pause to ask, does this person even deserve what I'm offering? That's the dilemma of the giver. They assume others think like them. They assume care is mutual, loyalty is natural, and intentions are pure. And that assumption, innocent as it is, becomes the very thing that exposes them, because not everyone sees your giving spirit as beautiful. Some see it as exploitable. To them, your open hands are not a gesture of love, they're an opportunity. They walk through your life like a guest who never intends to leave, taking what they want, draining what they need, and giving little to nothing back. And what makes it worse is that givers don't easily stop. Even when the signs are there, the emotional imbalance, the quiet disrespect, the lack of reciprocity, they keep hoping that consistency will breed gratitude, that love will inspire change, that loyalty will be mirrored someday. But days turn to weeks, and weeks to months, and still nothing. And by the time the giver realizes what's happened, they're exhausted, not just tired, empty. Their soul has been drawn from like a well, with no one ever thinking to refill it. But here's the truth: giving isn't wrong. Loving deeply isn't weak. What hurts is doing it without boundaries, because without a border, even the most sacred space can be invaded. Even the strongest heart can be overrun. Love, real love, needs walls, not to keep people out, but to protect what's within. And wisdom is learning where to draw that line, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. You weren't wrong for giving, you weren't foolish for caring. The only mistake was assuming that everyone deserved your access, that everyone should be allowed into your inner world. But your time, your energy, your emotional presence, these are not cheap things. They are precious, they are sacred, and it is not cruel to protect them, it is necessary. So now you learn, not how to stop giving, but how to give wisely, how to build a gate and ask, what are you bringing into my life? How to pause before pouring, to see if they've ever poured back. Because the greatest lesson a giver can learn is this: it's not your job to rescue everyone. Some people don't need your help. They need to learn how to help themselves. And your silence, your absence, your boundary might be the first real gift they've ever received. Being good is not the problem. Not knowing when to stop is. There is nothing wrong with being good. Let that be clear. In a world that constantly trades authenticity for applause, being good genuinely, quietly, and consistently is rare. But what turns that strength into suffering is not the goodness itself. It's the refusal to stop when it's no longer deserved. You see, goodness becomes a burden when it's extended without discernment. When it's offered to those who only take, who only call when they need, who only remember your worth when they've run out of options. You kept showing up even when they stopped checking in. You kept giving grace even when the pattern never changed. You stayed when they disappeared on you, forgave when they gave you silence, believed in them even after the lies. Not because you were weak, but because you held on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, your consistency would heal what was broken in them. But here's the bitter truth: no amount of goodness can save someone who is committed to using it for their benefit. They didn't change because they never had to. You softened the consequences. You absorbed the damage. And over time they didn't see your love as a gift, they saw it as a guarantee, something automatic, something owed. And when someone feels entitled to your goodness, they stop treating it with care. It becomes background noise, expected, ordinary. And that's the real heartbreak, when the most sacred parts of you are treated like they're replaceable. But here's what you must understand now. Being good does not mean being available to everyone. Being kind does not mean staying in places where you're disrespected. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to say no more. Because goodness, when paired with wisdom, becomes a force, one that uplifts the worthy and walks away from the careless. And that walk away, that's not betrayal, that's growth, that's clarity, that's reclaiming your energy from the hands of those who only knew how to waste it. You don't have to change who you are. You don't need to harden your heart or become cold to survive. You just need to recognize that not everyone deserves front row access to your soul. Save the best of you for those who see it, protect it, and give back. Let go of the idea that you must prove your goodness by enduring mistreatment. You already are good. That was never in question. The real strength lies not in how much you can give, but in how wisely you can choose when to stop. Let them wonder where you went. Let them feel the absence of what they thought would always be there. And when they do, let them realize they didn't lose someone weak. They lost someone rare. Someone who finally understood that being good doesn't mean being used, it means knowing when to walk away.